do, humans? Welcome to another episode of the Rediscover Human podcast with me, Tim Shieff, aka Human Timothy. This week it's episode 3 since we got back into it. And I'm kind of steering the ship solo right now. For this episode, I was trying to reflect on what I wanted to do. Before last week's episode, my plan was to do, last week's episode on biomechanics, what and why, and then follow on this week with how and who, or who and how. But I feel like it'd be nice to kind of spiral the delivery of the topics that we get into, because there's quite a few. We get into a lot of things. I'm passionate about a lot of different things and study a lot of different things. But I do feel it would make sense to we can come back, we can revisit that stuff, not to just, focus on one thing too much, unless I'm really super into something in that moment. But I want to go a bit broader with what we're going to cover today. And we're going to talk about the battle for our health. The battle I've had to face to get to where I'm at now. Not by no means complete, but a lot. Like I can take a sigh of relief, like I've been through a battle personally, and I think most people listening to this, if not 100%, 99%, have either battled for their health in the past, so can resonate with some of this stuff, or are battling for their health right now in some degree. For the adepts out there, we don't need the pressure to be great for us to address issues. We're sensitive, hypersensitive. My mother calls me hypersensitive, or tells me I'm too sensitive. I think being able to sense is important. It's something we're allowed to. We've been given an ability to sense, and the more we're sensitive and we can tune into that, that's the more power we have. It's more powerful. Not a superpower, just a human ability. But so the more sensitive among us, the more adept. We don't need as much pressure to know that we need to change things. We didn't need for it to get to a stage where we've, maybe, God forbid, got a cancer or something like that. Paul Chek says if you got cancer, it doesn't just happen overnight. You've been working at it for 5 or 10 years. And that makes sense to me. The more you study health and this side of health, you start to recognize that it's not something that just happens. Ill health doesn't just happen overnight. It's accumulation over years of not listening, of ignoring, of ignorance, unfortunately, misinformation, trusting the wrong systems. And so anyone probably listening to this has come to that awareness themselves, or been raised right, or through their own struggles and battles and attempts to solve it certain ways and then not getting satisfactory results. We're all in this battle for our health. And there's kind of 3 elements we talk about when we talk about this. We've got physical, mental, and emotional. Now, you could add, spiritual in there as well, or you can coin it whichever way you want. But for me, that's what I've identified. And for this, the purpose of this podcast is to focus on the physical. For me, as we'll discuss later on, I think mental health is largely talked about these days. A lot of people talk about mental health is a product of physical or emotional distress in the body. Someone's body's screaming out to them that something's not right. That the mind feels that, like a tight shoe. When you take it off, you're like, wow, that was tight. I didn't realize, how uncomfortable that was until I took it off. So the body, you've got, tight joints, stiff joints, organs, discomfort, a tight neck, something like that you've learned to live with. That's going to create a mental stress from the physical. but it's born in the physical. And on the other side of that, like I say, the emotional side of things, depression, relationship issues, work stress, will feel like mental stress or mental health, but it's birthed from our emotional, our lack of ability to process emotions, our denial of emotions, our suppression on emotions, distraction from emotions, resistance to emotions. All of that can result in mental health feeling challenged. So for me, I'm not going to focus on mental in this one. And we'll touch on emotional a little bit. That's a whole, life's work for another man. But that's something we will touch on in this, and then we can focus on it fully in one podcast. If not, I think the theme of a lot of these podcasts going forward is going to be about emotional, because that is how we get to the deeper aspects. So to begin, as this podcast is going to be focused on the battle for health, physical, what things do we have around us that affect us physically? Firstly, identifying the problems, and then we'll go into some solutions. So physical, what affects us physically? Well, one of the main things I've identified is chemicals. Chemically, we're chemical beings, and so we're affected chemically, and that we'll go into that. Obviously, that's diet is a major part of that, and things we clean the house with and all sorts of things beyond that. But diet, we're chemical beings. From directly what we're eating, is the chemicals, pesticides on the food, to is it chemically stimulating me with is there stimulants in it? We're also electrical beings, so we're affected by, if you get electrocuted, about it. It affects us physically very much. Now, on a much subtler level, there's a lot of electrical currents flying around, radio waves, all sorts of EMFs, so we're affected by that. Like I say, subtler is more subtly, but it's there. Vibrational, so we're vibrational beings. What was it Tesla said? If you want to think in terms of the universe or whatever, think vibrationally. And this, because then we're getting into Dr. Emote with the water and putting emotions into water and freezing the water and putting the frozen crystals under microscopes and seeing the different shapes that, the different emotions made to the water. So that goes into emotions. But beyond that, there are other vibrations as well. You've got, noise, sound, and light, vibrations in their own right. So we can talk about some of that, because that affects us physically. Noise pollution, light pollution, all that stuff. The physical body, as we've touched on, is also affected by, the emotional. Emotions affect the physical body. The physical body can affect the emotions, but the emotions trump that in the sense that, as we'll get into later, if you can work on an emotional level, you not only help heal the emotions or recover or rise or expand emotionally, you can heal and recover physically as well, because it's tied in. But it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. Just because you heal physically, it doesn't mean that you're going to heal emotionally. It will help, like I say, like taking off the tight shoe. There's this kind of two levels, the way I see it, to healing. There's stopping what's ailing you. I think it was Abraham Hicks talked about, with our natural state, we're always naturally trying to rise, like a cork in water is rising to the surface, and it's the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, the junk we're eating, the relationships around us, our own stored emotions that are keeping that cork from rising to the surface. So there's the removal of the things that are holding us down from a baseline. And that's nice that, you remove some junk food, you go through a few weeks of emotional suffering as the addiction's there, and then you will start to feel a natural baseline start to reappear. People take coffee out, they suffer for few days, a week, maybe a month, some people. But then they get this natural baseline energy, restores naturally to what it would have been without. So you've got the baseline, the recovery to baseline, and then to grow beyond that kind of natural baseline. That's all soul work, to that's soul expansion, soul recovery, soul healing, and then beyond soul expansion, which is all done through the emotional work. So you might notice you had an injury and it was stressing you out, and you thought it was really affecting your emotions, and you thought, if I fix this injury, and this is someone speaking from experience, so it's an example I can give and you might relate, it might be something else for you, but if I fix this problem, I'll be happy. And you fix the problem, and you do feel happy for a day or a week, and a week later, you're getting on with life, with the new life, without the problem, without the injury, without the limp or whatever it is, and you're back to where you were before. You don't actually feel emotionally any better, even though you thought that was the thing you were seeking to solve this physical issue, and then I'll be happier, or my baseline will be happier. Well, you're still in the same, for me anyway, and I imagine other people as well. Well, it's a week later, 2 weeks later, actually, I don't feel any emotionally any happier than I was. Other things little things are still getting to me. I'm still stressed about this. You just find a new thing to be trying to solve. So there's the restoration to baseline, removing the problem, fixing a niggling injury, removing toxic, people drinking alcohol every weekend, stop doing that, and they get to a baseline, but then they don't feel necessarily like don't feel more satisfied about life, even though they thought, well, if I just solve this one addiction I have, then I will feel more fulfilled. And it doesn't work, because that's where the emotional work comes in. If you don't do the emotional work on top of that physical work, the baseline doesn't rise. And it's through the processing of the emotions. And I said I won't talk about this episode necessarily, but I just wanted to caveat or set the tone for this whole podcast that emotional work, which is the soul-based work, trumps everything. But that's not to say that it's not important, because that work gets done when we work on the physical, when we work on our addictions in the physical. It starts to address that stuff as well, but that's where the root lies. So, just before I get into this again, not everything I talk about affects everyone. So I might talk about foods or electricity or whatever, and just know that it might not affect you, but it might affect other people. These are just things I've identified in my own sensitivities and observations, and talking to people about health. And I am curious. There's a reason why some stuff affects some people worse. People can smoke cigarettes, and someone could maybe smoke for 5 years and get lung cancer or throat cancer, and someone could smoke till they're 80, 90, and it's not taken one day off their life, or it's not seemed to have taken one day off their life. And again, I think the reason for this is emotional. What is the reason for them smoking? Are they covering up an emotion, or is it just a reason that's less negative or addictive? It's just a passing thing that they do. I can only speculate, but that's just an example that not everything here affects everyone in the same way. So if it doesn't relate to you, that's fine, and if it does, maybe you can get something from it. So we'll start with the chemical effects, the things that are around us I've identified that affect us chemically. These are mostly inorganic, so it's man-made, using man's current science abilities, which is in alignment with man's current soul condition, let's say. Our current level of technology, even though there's this facade propagated that we are achieving greater things than we've ever done scientifically and technologically, that's in a very narrow viewpoint. For me, advanced science and technology would be serving, the greater humanity, would be less or not destructive. The optimum science would be zero destruction, free energy, this kind of stuff would be when science is really advanced in my eyes. But that's, we can speculate on that, but it doesn't feel like there's a real push for that because it doesn't really profit. So there's a push for, green electricity right now, electrical cars and all that stuff, which is still not free energy. It's not, there's still a cost. At some point, there's wind turbines that are killing birds. Apparently they kill hundreds of thousands of birds, those wind turbines. Solar panels are, how much was it cost to produce solar panels? So there seems like there's some evolution away from combustive energy. But for the most part, our current state of science that we're doing as humanity is about, this kind of combustion. Something has to explode or implode, or there's a cost to most of our production. At some stage in the future, possibly it was in the past, there was a level of science that was more harmonious with nature, that was less trying to mess with it all. And, man with his test tube and goggles in a laboratory, it's not to say it's not served us in any way. I'm not discrediting that, but for the most part, I recognise it as not as taking us away from our nature and looking at things not as a whole, and too compartmentalized and segregated the way we've looked at things, and not as a whole. And so for as long as we've been doing that, the chemicals we're creating with this current level of science, for me, I have to recognize that there's not a cost to them. There's not a negative cost to any chemicals that has been created by man that we use in to clean these inorganic liquids or whatever, to clean our hair, our skin, sun cream full of crazy chemicals you can't pronounce and ingredients, to clean clothes and bed sheets. There's chemicals in that. The chemicals literally in our food, you've got Roundup and all sorts of pesticides. Chemicals in the water to clean the water. There's fluoride and chlorine and all sorts of chemicals in the water to make that drinkable short term. You won't catch diarrhea tomorrow, but who's to say what the 20-year, 30-year span of those chemicals is? So yes, short term in a vacuum it looks like clean water, but truly it's not naturally clean. It's not filtered by the earth. So for me, I have to say there's chemicals in it that have some cost to our absorption, to most of us. So there's the food, like I say, the pesticides, the actual chemicals in food colorings and all sorts in food processing to make food last longer on the shelves. There's chemicals there. There's a cost to it all, to our body, to our organs to process, to our fat to store it, however it is. Air pollution. I remember one of the books I read, I think it was Arnold Ehret, one of his books when I was fasting, and it said we think food pollution is the worst, and then water, and then air. And he said it's the other way around. It's air pollution is more of a problem than food pollution, which is, it's a claim, but it's interesting to read someone say that. So that's huge, obviously, with cars being the main proponent of that, but then also factories and all sorts out there that we're breathing in. Chemtrails, from the planes. People could call them contrails, but quite clearly, if you've observed it for enough time, there's something beyond just vapor in those aluminium and barium and all sorts of heavy metals coming out of the trails of those planes that's been tested and proven and destroying crops all over. Habitats, that's chemicals that not only in the air, but when I'm eating an apple off my partner's father's tree from his garden, or my plums from my parents' garden, I wash them, even though I feel like they're organic. There's still, these grids in the sky that have sort of watched them over time. These grids turn into thin layers of clouds, global dimming as they call it, reflecting the sun's rays back up. Well, thin particles, minimum particles of metals in that reflecting back up. So there's chemicals in there. I'm not saying all of this to be in any way, fear-mongering either. I'm just saying this because we've got to start from a platform of truth, of knowing what is the existence that we're in. And then, which I think most people listening to this already know, but to the part that I'm speaking, but we have to start from a place of truth, not, like I say, truth we can then deal with we know that now, what's the next step? It's not to be fearful, it's not to be paranoid, it's just to be aware. Power of awareness, So medicines is another one, big pharma, anything, drugs people take, daily pills they're popping to get by. There's the crazy opioid crisis right now. Paracetamol and all sorts of that stuff to, medications, thyroid medications that my dad's on and all sorts. These are chemically created by man to help one area, but not one of them doesn't have symptoms, aka a cost that may be worth, the juice might be worth the squeeze in some instances, but if it's only dealing with symptoms and not the root cause, for me it's just robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's creating, if not, robbing Peter and Perry to pay Paul. It's like creating more issues. You've got one issue and then you try and block that with this chemical solution rather than identifying the real root cause for it. You're just dealing with the effect of the issue, not the cause. And so creating more issues there. So you've got medicines, vaccines, all of that stuff, these man-made things to try and block up the dam. But it's like you're taking bricks from another part of the dam to fill in one part of the dam, and it's just not the solution. And then you got even more natural, organic to a degree, the 5 daily drugs, which a lot of people take daily or weekly, and that's alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, sugar, white sugar, and chocolate, cacao. These are all stimulants. Sure, you can buy an organic version, with a Soil Association stamp. It's organic, it's natural. It's a stimulant that affects the body. It challenges the organs. It affects the body's natural ability to produce its own stimulation when it needs to. When it chooses to, it starts to rely on these substances, and then so it can't produce itself. And so in the last 100 days of these daily drugs, because I'm not saying this is someone, on a high horse, like, I don't do these, you shouldn't do these, don't ever do these. It's not like that. This is just to bring awareness to it. So alcohol, I've had 2 drinks probably in the last 100 days. Didn't get wasted, just literally 1 drink one day, 1 drink another day. Less and less each year. Nicotine, haven't smoked. Last year, maybe it would have been 2 or 3 times within 100 days. Years before, I've smoked marijuana regularly in the past. Never really smoked cigarettes apart from if I was out drinking at a night out, something like that. But as far as this year goes, not smoked. Don't plan on it. Caffeine, not had any coffee this year. A few years ago, I got into coffee a little bit, but it's an antidepressant, just to be straight. I felt it as an antidepressant, as someone who didn't drink it and then drank it. Man, I felt good when I had it. And then the day after and the day after that, I didn't feel good. And it wasn't just energy crash, it was actually emotional. Like, I felt it. Would you give coffee to a child? They don't need it. We don't need it if we restore to our natural, God-given state of the human, of our natural ability, and it's just not necessary. I mean, I'm sorry for the coffee listeners. That's where it's at. You make your own choice. That's cool. But I've not had that in 100 days. Sugar, So I've had food ingredients that have had coconut sugar in. I've had the odd ice cream when I was in the Lake District, which was, a normal ice cream, which would have had sugar in it. So, we'll say maybe 5 times in 100 days, sugar. Not counting like coconut sugar and more natural sugars. This is refined sugars like white sugar, brown sugar. And then chocolate, cacao. I have not had any, I don't think. No, I think we went to Sow and Arrow, and there was a little cake bar thing that Haley bought that had a drizzle of chocolate on it, but barely enough to do anything. But yeah, so maybe say 1 in 100 days. But that was a big one for me. I was not having the other stuff, and I'd have sugar. I'd have chocolate. But probably, and to be fair, most chocolate does come with sugar. You can get raw chocolate. It doesn't taste very good. So I'd have dark chocolate rice cakes. That was my kind of vice in the evenings, because everything's incremental of like how to come off of stuff. So that would be my evening vice, would be like a dark chocolate rice cake. Semi-healthy, right? Man, that was affecting my sleep. I could feel I couldn't get into my parasympathetic nervous system. I couldn't get into a relaxed state. I just felt wired, and I'd lie in bed and I'd cut chocolate out along with the sugar, but I felt like it was the chocolate. I think I tried different sugared chocolates or no sugar chocolate or whatever. I think I experimented, but anyway, it felt fairly certain like it was the chocolate that was stimulating my nervous system. And when I came off it, I was sleeping so much better. So if that's something for you, because sleep, that in itself, sleep is when we'll get into the solutions, but that's one of the biggest keys to all of this, is to get our sleep right. So moving on from chemical to electrical, this is more subtler, less, you eat something, you have a coffee, you know about it, like quickly. Electrical, you don't know, if you electrocute yourself in the plug socket, yeah, you know about it. But if there's just, you're in a building with loads of Wi-Fi's and stuff, I think some of us probably kind of start to tune in and start to sense that. We're like, maybe I feel it. A few of us might know for certain, a few of us might sense it, some of us might never feel it. But it's something, it's there. Microwaves, you wouldn't put your head in a microwave. Pretty obvious. Maybe don't have one in your house. But, maybe do, but it still feels like that current level of man's science right now, something like a microwave, where in 50 years' time, like cigarettes, oh no, what, we shouldn't be using microwaves. We don't need 50 years to pass and the mainstream to tell me that I shouldn't use a microwave. So I don't need to. I don't know that it's bad. I sense that it might be. I don't need it. Phones, they're giving off radiation all the time. Wi-Fi's, routers, radio towers. We don't, Tesla, apparently, I've said this before, and then someone asked me to find the information. I don't know where I saw it or read it, and it might not even be true, but that, around his time there was radio signals going about, and he didn't want to be affected by the radio signals, and he built like a Tesla cage or something to basically to protect him from the radio waves. What's the name for it? Faraday cage, that was it. That's what I heard. Anyway, who knows if it's true or not, but basically that was from radio waves. Nowadays we've got unless you're in the mountains, it's hard to really get away from most of it. So other things to go into as well that are affecting our physical. Light is a pretty big one. And there's heavy light that affects us. So phones and TVs, these LEDs, bright lights, bright colours, straight into our eyeballs. It stimulates the hormones. The source of light from nature, as nature's provided, is the sun. It's most bright in the middle of the day. It fades in and it fades out. That's the way kind of nature designed it. And it stimulates, we've got these circadian rhythms going off in the body with hormones and different cycles of different organs doing different things at different times. Well, you put bright lights in the eyeballs, it affects all of that stuff. It starts to affect that, and fundamentally affects our sleep. So phones and TVs are a big one, heavy stuff. And then the light stuff, more like light bulbs and street lights. Just the more kind of white noisy stuff that happens in the background, but that still is somewhat unnatural that affects it. And from light moving on to noise now, heavy noise, things like sirens. I remember living in London and just hearing sirens all the time in bed at night. You lose count. It becomes background noise. You become desensitized to it. But desensitization doesn't mean that it's fine now. And if you live in a rural area and you go into a city and you hear that, it's actually quite shocking. If you're not used to it and you notice it, it is so shocking, and people become desensitized to it. But that's not a sign of health, is it? That you're just not sensitive to it anymore. Like my mother's not sensitive to coffee. She can drink coffee at 11 o'clock at night and still sleep. But that doesn't mean that because she's not sensitive, that there's not some serious damage already existing for her, adrenal glands to not be able to do what they do to other people. Like if I had one or a child had one. So just because you're desensitized to it doesn't mean there's not damage done, that you'd feel better if you were able to undo the damage. So then that's kind of the heavier noises, that aeroplane, if you live by a plane's airport, or if you live by a train track, sometimes that's so loud when trains go past. To more light noises, like white noise. If you have a fan, some people can't sleep without white noise. At my parents' house, they have a pond in the garden, and if I want to open the window, I like to sleep with my window open. I have to turn the pond off because it's just so unnatural to me, this constant water feature running. Whereas if it was a river, there's a chaotic nature to it that doesn't seem to have a negative effect. But if it's white noise and it's a constant stream of noise, it seems to affect me. And then there's also, like cars driving by. If you live by any kind of thoroughfare, or everyone's on a noisy road, and people are driving to work, and you hear that 7:30 buzz, you're like half asleep, and you can just hear, what time it is by the cars driving. That gives me a little light anxiety. That does. Having to know what time it is by hearing the cars drive. I don't think that's healthy. I'd rather live somewhere where I'd only know either by the sun coming up, knowing what time I normally wake up, or looking at a clock if I wanted to do that. I'd rather just have a natural gauge. But to know, because it's the car, I can hear cars, and you're like, that means I've got to get up soon. That means I don't have any more sleep because there's cars driving. There's something to that. And like I say, not everything affects everyone. Some people might be desensitized, and some people it might just not affect. So there's so much scope within this for, there's no hard, fast rule about this stuff. And then some people might be affected by it. So then there's just to touch on some, some daily things that affect us mentally that then can have a physical effect on us. It's like unnatural shapes. So like living in a square room, in a box building with straight roads, walking around a city. Nature doesn't draw straight lines or design squares, and there's just something to that it's like there's a reason. A jail cell is a box with bars on the window. No one wants that. Now there's levels. If you turn down the dial on the jail cell, you end up with a square house. If you turn it off, you end up camping in nature. But there's all spectrum and levels to it. Porn is a massive one for mental health. I think so anyway. It's just a sign of. Well, it's a sign, like we said, the mental is often emotional, so it's some sign of emotional positioning of the person, which I've been, the things we choose to watch, so like porn, but beyond that, horror movies that depict, gruesome deaths, eerie TV shows like Black Mirror and these weird, futuristic, strange, eerily like could be true things. There's something, I find that odd. I mean, and not to say that there's not a reason to ever watch that stuff. If I watch that to try to trigger my own fears towards that happening, then that's semi-productive. But if I watch it from some weird, emotional, masturbatory place, like, ooh, look at this, it's kind of like fear porn. The world, I recognise in a lot of mainstream today, people love this fear porn of like that movie, The Purge. I've never watched it, but I've even seen in the Jake Paul fight the other day, and then Brian Ortega more recently came out to some song from The Purge and wore the Purge masks, and it's like that quote where it's like, for 24 hours, crime is allowed, including murder, or something, paraphrasing to that effect. Like, people get off on watching that stuff, and I think if you do, you kind of have to question the place in you that comes from that. If you're not, and I really try not judging, because I watch the UFC, I watch men fighting, and there's something in me there's some weird fight porn, to do with that, whatever, something in that's emotionally within me that's got to overcome that eventually. But it's just to be aware that it's probably not healthy that I do that, and it's probably not healthy that if we have a fantasy about these things, like I say, unless we're with the intention to try to process something. And it goes to music as well, things with dark lyrics. I used to listen to a rapper called Necro, Jedi Mind Tricks, and all sorts of rap and stuff where they depict gruesome murders and stuff. But there's art to it, and there's storytelling. It's kind of the place with which you're coming to it from, what you're getting from it. The books that we read, murder mysteries and all sorts. Then there's cultural lies that we grew up with. Just as I'm touching on the mental stuff, like, lies like Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, that we teach our children that there's this mystery man that comes down the chimney and gives gifts. Giving up the fact that the parent, who's the provider, just worked hard to use their money to buy presents. So not only have you given up the role of gift giving from the truth, of who gave it and who worked for it, then they find out you lied. So they're not only, and I think to a lot of people, they really, it's a whole real subject to get into, to be honest. I don't want to get into all in this, but those little lies that we think, it's just fun. Oh no, it's just Christmas. And they call you a Scrooge for saying, I don't think we should lie to children about a mystical fat man with a white beard that gives them presents, or a little fairy that comes and gives them money for their teeth. This stuff, life is magical without lies. And when you make up lies to make it seem magical and then they're not true, well, then what's left? I don't think it's healthy. And there's sexual energy, which I can't really speak for women, but male ejaculation, ejaculating regularly, daily, multiple times a day or every other day, is draining physically and leaves you with not so much energy to be used for other stuff, for other creative purposes, for other spiritual purposes, for other physical purposes. So regular ejaculation is something. I'm kind of supposed to be just addressing the issues now, and then we get into the solutions later. But hard for me not to go into that as well. Then there's also the posture-based stuff, which for me is one of my biggest passions. So there's a naturally aligned posture and biomechanics, the way we can move, where our muscle and skeleton work together in harmony. And if this has been affected through injury or stored emotions or habitual patterns of sitting on soft chairs and sleeping in comfy beds and cushioned shoes. It's hard to reverse, and this affects our ability to digest and process food properly, which is major, especially if it's already got other battles going off as well with chemicals and all sorts. And we're already battling more digestive battles than we've probably ever battled in history. And then to add posture on top of it, it's not a lot of love for our body, hey? It's depressing and disempowering to have physical injuries. When you were at the peak of your physical prowess as a human, do you remember? Thing is, sometimes it's hard to remember how we felt if we haven't felt it in ages. The other day I came out of climbing centre and I was sweating, and I was with a guy there I'd just met the previous climb. I went like 3 days before and met this guy. He introduced himself, Jamie. We climbed together, had a good session together. I went back a few days later on my own, and I didn't know which climbing centre. I was going to go to a different climbing centre. I'll just go back to that one, even though I thought I'd done most of the climbs there that were within my spectrum of difficulty. And he just happened to be there, about to start his session same time as me, and we climbed for a few hours and sweated, and I came out and I just felt empowered. I felt physically strong, and there was just something empowering to being physically functional and capable. And if my shoulder was hurting or I had tendonitis in my elbow, which I had 6 months ago, and you have a semi-alright session, I can't push it too much because of my elbow, and you come out and it's obviously worked it, so it's a little bit sorer than when you went in. Well, I got a sweat on and I got some things accomplished, but the difference in feeling like you can move without inhibition, without holding back, like a child can, or a younger, most children, to feel that as an adult, man, that is special. That is empowering. And that's posture and biomechanics. That is why we want to work on that. It's one of the reasons. As well as if you are physically struggling with niggles and it gets worse, and you have a knee, and then you're on crutches or in a wheelchair, God forbid, and we can become a burden to others, which then it's not only emotional for us to feel like we're a burden, it's emotional for them to have to put up with it. So that's a huge one to work on, posture. And within the physical as well as we've got the organs, which I've touched on. But these organs, they've got to process all of our shit, all of our poop, everything we make the choice to put in our mouth, whether lovingly or unlovingly, it has to deal with. And now, like we just touched on, posture is going to affect its ability here. What you're actually eating is going to affect its ability here. So, your ratio, that's one part of it, but ratios of carbs to fats, to proteins, the timing of these, from mono meals where it's one ingredient, kind of the way, when I was raw vegan, fruitarian, it made sense to me. Nature provides an apple tree, so eat, 10 apples and nothing else for a few hours, and then it's easy to digest. It knows from when it hits the tongue what it needs to produce, to process it once it hits the stomach. But when we're eating meals of 10 ingredients, even that's whole food, like, let alone as soon as you add in something processed where there's 15 ingredients per processed item, or whatever, however many is in that processed item. I remember reading the Essene Gospel of Peace years ago, and it just said don't eat more than 2 or 3 ingredients per meal. And that kind of makes more sense to me. That's a more simplistic way. That's kind of how the indigenous people, Aborigines of Australia, there's a book I read, Mutant Message Down Under, really good short book. I'm going to actually go through that for at least part of an episode. But they talked about how man, who we're mutant versions of man now, apparently to them, which I can't argue with, has to put gravy on everything. You can't just eat the truth of how something is. You can't just appreciate it, eat it, enjoy it as it is. We have to add gravy or icing to it to make it on top of what it already is. And every layer you add onto something, every ingredient makes it more and more complex for the body to create the right chemicals to break down and process it, So there's the ultimate enjoyment, what they say, 50% carbs, 50% fat is the ultimate enjoyment in food. Not that nature really provides anything in that sense, to those ratios, and yet that's probably one of the hardest for the body to know what to deal with, let alone all the stimulation that's going off from it, to how it goes through each organ as it's getting processed, to storing it in the body as fat or whatever. There's so many levels to that. And speaking on the organs, this obviously, as everything is holistic and tied together, emotions and organs go together like white on rice. So if you look at, I think it's kind of Chinese medicine, but it's almost common knowledge now in many circles, especially in naturopathic or holistic circles. Lungs is related to kind of grief. So the more we're in grief, or we're storing unfelt grief, that's going to affect our lungs' ability to breathe, which on the other side of that is lungs is courage expressed. Healthy lungs leads to courage. The heart, is love, obviously. But that's on the flip side of that is being depression. If you're depressed or unfulfilled, that's going to affect your heart. Or if your heart's physically affected, then that's going to lead to depression or feeling unfulfilled. The liver is related to anger, stored anger, unfelt anger, or when you're expressing it. It's going through that. And kidney is linked to fear and all these, there's emotions attached to each organ, and our inability to process them can lead to long, stagnant problems with those organs. And again, Western medicine system doesn't look at this stuff. Doesn't look at emotions, and that trumps everything. And so that kind of is a broad stroke on physical healing, on the physical problems that we face day to day. Many of us face. And so let's get into some solutions, As I can't solve it for you, but I can just offer some of my insights that have come. As I think you may be able to hear the neighbour likes cutting his hedge right now, but either way, the information is the same. So, physical healing, a major point on this is getting the sleep right. Because if you're not deep sleeping like a child, it's going to make it an uphill battle. And that's something I can't really offer you answers on, other than, obviously light, white noise, chemicals, stimulants. Yeah. So you've got sympathetic and parasympathetic, and the body should be able to regulate and know between each mode, when it wants to be in sympathetic, when it's out in the day doing something physical, and when it wants to down-regulate to parasympathetic, when it needs to relax and recover. And if it can't discern or differentiate between the two, or it's stuck in one, or it's can't go between the two extremes, it's the problem. And many of us are kind of stuck in the middle, or stuck in sympathetic, which is creating fatigue in all levels and stops us sleeping. But so all this stuff, any solution we do is going to help the body to get back to its natural ability to discern between the two, and help us to sleep and physically recover. So chemically, first, do no harm. Stop taking negative chemicals. in our food, try and, buy pesticide food that's organic, has not been sprayed with pesticides, unnatural shampoos and skin lotions and sun creams, all this kind of stuff. Find a natural washing up liquid, natural washing machine. Can't even think of the word now. Not deodorant. What do you clean washing with? Conditioner, fabric conditioner, that kind of stuff. You can find, but there's the Eco brand or whatever, but I'm not even sure they're the best one. Haley uses, I think, white wine vinegar and essential oil for some stuff. Or she uses a lot of apple cider vinegar for cleaning surfaces and stuff. There are natural. Our ancestors had a way to get us to here. That was before these chemicals existed. That are just they're just destroying all bacteria, good bacteria bad bacteria and good bacteria, which destroys our immune system's ability, because we need bacteria to help protect us and support our immune system and process all this stuff around us that's not conducive to health. But the more we get into chemicals, the more the body gets confused and doesn't know what to do, and the more it makes it more of an uphill battle for it. So yeah, just trying to limit the household chemicals and the food chemicals that we're taking in. Cutting out stimulants that we're eating, the 5 daily drugs: alcohol, nicotine, coffee, sugar, chocolate. Limiting them, restricting them, weaning off of them is that's going to be huge if we want to get back to our natural ability to have parasympathetic and sympathetic states, as and when they're needed, the right one at the right time. Eating whole food, organic and local. So if it's got ingredients on the packet, if it's been processed, if there's chemicals in it, try to limit that. And this is, I don't need preaching to the choir. I don't really feel like I need to go deep into this stuff. But yeah, purifying water. There's many methods. Berkeley filter is one me and Haley use. You can distill it, and then when I lived on my own, I was distilling it and adding a pinch of salt to each batch, and that was really working well. So distill is a good way to purify, to make sure it's really pure. Going to a spring is an option. I can't speak for the cleanliness of the spring, but do your own research, and collecting water from a spring seems really cool. Or clean spring or stream. Purifying the air. I bought an air purifier once. I used it for a bit. I wasn't really sure. It's so subtle, that stuff. It's so hard to know. It sounded like it was working hard. It sounded like I had to work hard. But leaving windows open as much as you can. I remember seeing, I can't remember the numbers, but the air outside a house compared to the air inside a room, and then even with the window open, it's only a fraction closer, because trying to get flow through. I always remember one of the best night's sleep I ever had was in Hawaii, on the island of Hilo, at my friend Ryan's house, on his floor, and there was a window on one side of my bed and a window at the other side of my bed, and the ocean about half a mile from one of the windows, and there was a breeze over my face as I slept, and I woke up and felt so rejuvenated. And there's probably many other reasons of that. That was my first night in Hawaii. There's a lot of, jet lag, flying, all sorts of stuff. But part of me was like, man, that was that airflow. That was that airflow. So getting airflow, especially above you when you sleep, if you can, is very good. Seeking naturopathic or holistic remedies rather than chemicals and drugs and pharmaceutical solutions. Trying to resolve the root cause rather than plugging symptoms, for sure, is a big one. And then if you've got symptoms that you want to work on, naturopathic, ginger and lemon and all sorts of other stuff like that. I'm not an expert in that, but you can do your own research there. Moving to a more rural area. That's going to come up a lot, I think. It's just fundamentally that's going to help get away from the chemicals and toxins that city life kind of breeds. And then again, on the chemical physical supplement, getting good supplements, the right supplements, that's so hard to say. People have multivitamins, but then, learning so much from Hayley. I think hopefully can do a pod with her, because she's the supplement wizard. But, we have a good source of vitamin C with sea buckthorn juice. Silica is one that she's got like major ones, like bee bread for B vitamins. There's so much to go into with supplements, but I've been someone who's been on and off supplements, an advocate, and then said, actually, if the diet's balanced, we don't need them. I don't know. I'm not certain either way. So I take some supplements, but much more natural supplements, and less chemical, less processed, the better, I think. You can supplement organ meats and all sorts of that stuff as well. Someone like Josh's Ape Nutrition doing that, they do organ meats in supplement form, which there's value to that, I think, as well. And then you can do mushroom supplements like reishi and lion's mane. Right, so on to electrical solutions for electrical. So earthing, grounding, many of you are probably familiar with that. There's a really good film, I think it was just called Grounding, I watched years ago. Got me inspired, talks about anti-inflammatory effects of being barefoot on the earth. Truthfully, I never noticed a difference really. Subtly maybe, but a direct difference from, let's say, from all the EMFs our body stores these ions, positively charged ions, and when we stand barefoot on the earth, we ground, we earth, we release these charged ions, and we want negatively charged ions, otherwise our blood coagulates. There's all this science to it. I can't say for certain. It seems logical that the way we're designed is to not have shoes and stand on grass and dirt and sand. There will be something positive to that. So that's one way, and you can get earthen sheets. I slept in an earthen sheet for probably 5 years of my life. Don't currently do it, but when I had full house set up, that's something that I was on and off. But again, it's so subtle, I don't feel like you need to be obsessed with it. Airplane moding the phone is quite a good one. Every now and then, when you don't feel like you need it, or if you're just with some friends that you're talking, you don't just airplane mode your phone. It doesn't need to be constantly searching for signal, bringing radiation through. Going out for walks without any technology, without a watch, without a phone, or airplane mode, or turn it off is good as well. But yeah, just trying to get away from electronic technology for a good stint of time, either daily or, take a holiday from it. Limiting headphone usage, especially the wireless headphones. You can get headphones that don't allow the electrical. I've bought some in the past, so they were absolutely pants. But they have I don't know what they call it. It's kind of like a vacuum or something to stop the electrical current going up into your ears anyway. So you can get headphones. I'd definitely recommend something like that if you're going to use headphones a lot. Getting rid of a microwave, unplugging stuff from the wall. That's something that my friend Matthias was doing at home. It's like even if it's plugged in and the plug's turned off, it's still calling a current towards it. So you can completely, if you can, unplug things from the wall when they're not in use. If this is something that you feel that EMF, because EMFs affects some people massively. I've heard quite a few stories of someone who had a Tesla and they got really sick and they got rid of the Tesla and they got better because Tesla is just literally an EMF machine. But people that have grounded all their beds in the earth, people turn everything off at night, including the fridge, like unplug everything, and then there was one tactic, they freeze a bottle of water and in the night you just put it in the fridge and it keeps everything cool while the fridge is turned off, if you want to get that deep with it. I think graphene paint is something you can paint a room in the house with graphene paint. That will stop all radiation coming in. It could be like your meditation room. I actually bought an EMF net to sleep in. So I was sleeping in a completely no radiation bed for a while, which is made out of block silver, which is quite a cool material. And I've bought some block silver clothing. I don't actually even use it, but essentially it's like a thin woven silver thing that protects whatever's inside of it from radiation, from electrical radiation coming through, which, leads me to the most important point, is that we should all wear tinfoil hats all the time, even at home, and, especially in public and in cities. No, I'm joking. But that the thing is, hiding in plain sight, and when you recognise the triggers of any kind of conspiratorial talk, the things that get laughed at the most are often where there's things hidden behind those doors, and so they've protected them by culturally training everyone to scoff at them. And so, things like flat Earth, which people are culturally trained to laugh at without fair discussion, and say, "Oh, what you wear a tinfoil hat," and it's just genius, isn't it? Really, that they've, actually, you probably want. I've bought a block silver beanie, which is a tinfoil hat, to protect my noggin from. I don't wear it, to be honest. I've not got deep into it, but I think there is something to that, and it does affect some people more than others. But with the rise of 5G and everything, there's no way that stuff's not detrimental to human cells in some way. The more we ping radiation about, electrical radiation about. So the solution, another one, move to a rural area, move out of a city. See that come up again. So the light, I talked about the phones and the TV screens. So you can get blue light blocking glasses. Imagine everyone here's either got a pair or aware of them. Orange tinted glasses. You can get cheap pairs on Amazon. Don't know how effective they are. You can get, there's better brands out there, 50 quid for a pair. They look a bit better. I wear mine most days. I don't watch much TV. When we do, especially in the evening, I'll wear them. Red screen. I've all my Apple products. On my computers, I've got an app called Iris, which can make the screen completely red. So in the evenings, even just before as the sun's setting, I'll go red, or as it sets. My iPhone, iPad, I can make the screen completely red. There's a way. I've put a video on YouTube actually talking about red light life on my Tim Shieff YouTube channel, youtube.com/livewire. Made the screen red so that there's no blue light coming from the screen, and I actually feel a difference with that, especially if you checking your phone in the morning. You don't want this blast of blue light into your eyes. There's candles in the evening as a solution to light bulbs, and Neo's playing outside. He's playing a game, trying to break into the dojo. So yeah, you can get blue light free light bulbs, because some even just like store-bought light bulbs contain unnatural blue light to a degree. And you can buy light bulbs, I think it's blue light, I can't remember what the website is, bluelightblocker.com or something, I don't know. But I bought light bulbs, and I've got a night light that's got zero blue light in it. It's just got like an orange light. Then there's also ones which have zero blue or green light, which is purely just red, but they're pretty dark. You can't do too much with them. So I kind of like the orange is like a happy medium. But just use you can just use candles as well as a solution. You can use eye masks and blackout curtains, because obviously street lights in the evening, it can affect some people. Like I say, not affect at all. For me, I feel like the darker room I sleep in, the better I sleep. I can't sleep with an eye mask, so blackout curtains is a good solution. Move somewhere rural where there's less light pollution. Noise, so yeah, you could use earplugs. Again, I can't sleep with earplugs. If you're affected by sirens or cars in the morning, move somewhere rural. This is just a message to myself to do that. So other things, like if you're in the house and it's, like I said, it's square box, like a jail, prison cell, bring nature inside. Plants in your house, nice white log you found at a beach or something like that. So plants, make your house like Gaudi. If anyone's been to Barcelona, visited Gaudi's house, it's really cool. I visited it and it's got like windows glass inspired by turtle shells, and it's just such a funky house. You Google it if you want, Gaudi's house, and just see how it's just so inspired by nature, and there's no straight lines, and it's all random, and it's like, let's all build houses like Gaudi. Move somewhere rural where you look out your window and you just see pastures and fields rather than square walls and houses, pubs. So on to the point about sexual energy being released through ejaculation, semen retention, something quite important, or would have been more natural back in the day. I think so. And I think Mantak Chia has some good books on it, but he says 4 days for anyone 20 to 30 years old. You want to hold it for at least 4 days. Anyone 30 to 40 year olds, you want to hold it for at least 8 to 10 days between ejaculation. I think longer, you'll learn some stuff about yourself. You might feel even that energy build and build. For me, speculation, but I feel like I've had the question for years, in God's design, how were we meant to not have children but have sex? Because condoms don't seem natural, and no one can say that contraceptive pills that women are expected to take is natural in any way. The way that it affects what it actually does and the way it affects them in so many ways is so unnatural and chemical. Then it literally made sense to me this year. It just clicked. It was like, if the man just holds his seed, this isn't advice, by the way, because you could say, oh, well, there's pre-cum and all this stuff, but so far, fingers crossed, it's worked for me since discovering, and it's challenging, and in the challenge is strengthening, but the man just holds his seed and pleasures the woman. What does Mantak Chia? He always says, you want more. The man that's why he orgasms, because he just wants to feel more. He wants that next feeling, and you just can't. You try to take that, and it costs you. And that's almost, for me, it's like a metaphor for life. Like, you want that orgasm, you want to ejaculate, you want that moment, and that moment, that brief moment, costs your energy for the next 2 or 3 days. And that's what, people want to drink alcohol on a Saturday night because they just want that release. They want that, but it's going to cost them for some days. That ability to choose not to ejaculate as a man can transcend, that strength can transcend just that moment of, sexual release that you're after. That's a whole, discussion for the sexuality podcast. So on the flip side of all the shows we talked about, watching dark horror movies with depicting deaths and stuff, you can find positive, pure shows, some even without bad guys, if you can find them. I really like Studio Ghibli movies, many of them without any kind of bad guys, or they're just very kind of pure and innocent and really beautifully done, and really love them. So definitely Studio Ghibli is a recommendation if you wanted to watch something. Avatar: The Last Airbender there's still us versus them. I tried to find things without like us versus them or bad guys with the Fire Nation, but there is still really, good bad guy sees the wrongdoing of his ways and becomes good, and there's good messages within that. And another one I really loved, is my favorite anime of all time, Hunter x Hunter. Moments of it are a bit dark, but just going as a character, the main character, the pure spirit, and how the world around them bends to meet their purity and innocence is inspiring to witness. And I really love that show. Then it's, things like sport are more honest and truthful. I even used to say, like, reality TV. It's better to watch reality TV than to watch drama, because at least reality TV is the truth of what it is. It's just witnessing. But at the same time, reality TV is so manipulated, and why are you wanting to watch? I like Jersey Shore and Geordie Shore and Jersey Shore. I watch both of them, but that again was some sort of witnessing humans, in a certain type of human, fascinated by the way they live, and it probably wasn't from a healthy place within me, that desire to witness that in some, again, the weird porn kind of way. And what would be the word? I need a word before that reality porn or whatever. Kind of car crash TV kind of stuff. But yeah, to some way I used to think reality TV may be better than some dramas, but it's hard to, can't really, there's no clear-cut answer on that. But sport, in a sense, sport is honest and truthful. So in a way it's pure, but at the same time it can be like a modern war, because it's two people or two teams trying to win for glory, to be better than the other one and fighting over. But then you could watch something like breakdance. I used to love breakdance battles, although I guess they're still battling, aren't they? To like a ballet performance, something like that, where it's expressive, human, or Cirque du Soleil. There you go, something like that. It's beautiful, honest, peak of human expression. Yes, there's nice stuff out there to watch. To what you're studying spiritually uplifting, inspiring texts, religious doctrine that you're reading. Is it uplifting, or is it instilling fear, or is it threatening or loving? So for me, my favorite spiritual study is divine truth. I think I've gone down many different rabbit holes and experimented with many religions and spiritual teachings, and that's what I've arrived at as the ultimate. And divine truth, it says it in the title, simply there. Divine truth as God, as it pertains to God. And I think they teach it the way that it says on the tin. I think, because someone else could just say divine truth, but it could easily not necessarily be that, but I feel like that is what it says it is. Things like walking, gentle exercise like walking, especially after eating, really good to help the digestion, help the organs. Even the rope rolling for me really helped my digestion and organs, if I just do like a couple minutes after I eat. Breath work, meditation, swimming in nature. I'd say cold water, but a healthy cold, swimming in a river or the ocean. I think this, you got to check your reasons for doing it. If you're trying to force an ice bath and switch off your mind, you're kind of trying to disconnect from the suffering, and your body's saying, no, get out of here, and you're trying to train yourself to not listen to that. I don't think that's healthy. But a nice swim in the river or a lake, where you're not ignoring your body's reaction to the stimulation, and it's like, yes, it might feel a little bit cold, but it's not damaging or detrimental or taxing. There's a really healthy time and a place to swim in, and temperature to swim in for each person. And some people can swim in freezing, and it's positive for them. For me, my temperature isn't quite frozen, but I do love swimming in nature. And just time spent in nature, hiking, camping, climbing trees, talking to God, praying or speaking or trying to listen, or introspection is a massive, which when we talk in future about emotions and mental health, whatever we get into, introspection is just huge for that. So just reflecting on emotions you felt today, emotions you felt throughout your life, what's triggered it, how you've reacted because you felt that way, how you want to solutions to that. My name is Earl type, reflecting on the ill actions of your day, of your life, and how you can make amends or feel remorse for that, and just living in generally with humility, within your means. But that's not to say it doesn't have to be abundant. You can still have abundance and that not cost the earth, because the way the earth is designed. A fruit tree has an abundance of fruit that, some of them end up getting rotten on the floor. The animals get some goes back into the soil, humans get to eat some. That's abundant living in harmony with nature. So you can live abundantly, but still with humility. And I can't, give you a fair answer on how to do that right now, but having that as a goal and reflecting about what that means could be useful. So as for posture and biomechanics, as I mentioned, that's a big one to work on. That's a physical battle that we face. Restoring natural alignment. And so you can use whatever practice you use. Yoga, I would recommend, isn't quite the most accurate unless you are using other principles. You can use yoga-based principles, but with knowing what you're aiming for and stuff is too crucial. So I think a practice like Flowbility for me is one of the best. Postural Restoration Institute go to claim to help restore natural alignment, and they seem to get some pretty good results. Functional patterns, there's other ones out there. Whatever you're into, like I say, Flowbility, Postural Restoration Institute, there's David Gray, go to. These things I think worth investigating for yourself. Spine health is huge. There's a book I read, Ageless Spine, Lasting Health, Ageless Spine, I think it was called, by Kathleen Porter. That was really good for just basic education on spine health, what a healthy spine, how the body should, to help know what I'm aiming for with natural alignment, and it's got some good ideas how to do that. The fascia, when we look at the body, often we just look at muscles and bones, ignoring fascia, it's more ignorant to it. We don't really know much about fascia. There's still a lot of ongoing new research about that. But I think that if you want to, starting to look at that and understand that has been quite useful and crucial for me in restoring balance to my body's physical, the posture and biomechanics. Encouraging natural patterns of movement. So like rope flow for me is the prime example of that, to help restore natural patterns of movement, to encourage natural patterns, to help encourage all the joints to work evenly and do their part, so we're not just favouring one joint. It helps spread the movement pattern out from the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, from the spine out and from outside in, evening the edges, smoothing the edges of our patterns of movement. So for me, rope flow is the optimum for that. Natural resting postures, so like in Japan, they sit on their shins. We call this seiza posture, but just helps the body, the lymphatic drainage system works in the backs of the knees and down the calves. They say that like your heels, like your second heart, the way it pumps blood and clears toxins and stuff. When we walk, whereas if the back of our back chain, our glutes, our hamstrings and our calves are glued up and tight, and there's not much flow and it's stagnant energy, it's tough. Whereas something like seiza is a good position to help flush that out. Just sleeping, you could sleep on a firmer bed or wear barefoot shoes, but these are all, if you've got a tight spine or hip problem or shoulder problem and you suddenly go to a firm bed, it could make it worse. So aiming to consciously correct these issues in your awake time with posture correction, and then you could start to move to a firmer bed, and the benefits would just be exponential, because you're correcting your posture and then you're sleeping your recovery is then even better. So you're able to move better and rest and recover better. And the same goes for barefoot shoes. It's like, if you just go to barefoot shoes but don't do anything to strengthen your feet, you could cause more problems. So strengthen your feet, go to barefoot shoes, or I don't like the word barefoot shoes, minimal shoes, or barefoot, and start to restore your body's natural strength and abilities. But just throwing your sofa out and only wearing minimal shoes can cause more problems if you're not doing the work in between to strengthen and correct the natural patterns, which is the whole podcast we talked about last episode, and will come up in future podcasts about who and how to do posture correction. So the organs, to help them, again, the posture work's huge for helping the organs to function better. If we get the rib cage and the pelvis back to natural alignment, everything in between can do its job. It's plumbing the way God designed it to do. Emotional work, dealing with our emotions, not bottling them up, letting them flow through us, and then doing that introspection to try and delve deep to what emotions are actually stored from childhood, because just because they're not in the tip of our brain doesn't mean that they're not there, and that the law of attraction isn't bringing them about regularly in our lives to try to deal with. So emotional work's great for organs, one of the most important things to do. And eating a natural diet for organs as well, like we said. So the more we can, whole food, local, organic, it's going to be major for that. And so I've gone on quite a bit. So like an hour and 25 minutes, something like that, an hour and 20. Just to finish then, because I've covered a lot, and I hope either that's just, reiterated some ideas to yourself, or it's given you some ideas to look into, something to research. This is a lifelong journey. It's not a doing process. It's more of an undoing process, if anything. It's a journey to a more humble way of living. It's a journey to more awareness. It encompasses everything. It offers everything that you want, everything that you learn along the way to help yourself and to help others. A journey towards health and happiness, because that's what every day, that's what we're working for, right? What are we working for? To be happy, to feel joy, to enjoy life, which is an absolute birthright, and we're all capable of enjoying every day and enjoying nature and our bodies. And it is a battle that if you're not got skin in the game, it's getting taken away from you right now. It's crucial. It's getting taken away from all of us slowly, and it's getting taken away from our children, more importantly. It's a battle for our health. It's a battle for their health, because the battle is going to get harder and harder the more they grow up with this current scientific Western medicine mindset of injecting stuff. You can't inject health. Let's just get that clear. You cannot inject health. So when my 4-year-old neighbour's coming around with a patch on his arm because he's just had a vaccine, it wasn't the current vaccine, but it was a vaccine for a 4-year-old, needle in his arm, and something sinks inside me. And that's just now. What's to say when 20 years' time, when they just can't help, they're just dociled up from birth, straight out the mother, straight, right, have your dose of 10 injections, and then you get on with your life in your cell. I don't know, however it goes, but it's a battle. It's a battle, and we've all got skin in the game, whether we're aware of it or not. And so to be aware of it and then to start taking action and to choosing for health is responsibility, but it's power. It's empowering, and it's the decision that we all need to take responsibility for our own health, because it doesn't just affect us. Well, fundamentally it affects us, so that's important. But then it affects everyone around us. We don't want to be a burden to others. It's an act of love for those around us, is to take care of our own health so that they don't have to. So that the state doesn't have to. So we don't have to lean on the state. We don't have to rely on filling up the hospital beds. We can do the most we can by ourselves, and then in emergency, when we need that stuff, we can use that stuff. And so just to finish, I'll have a sip of water, and then I want to read a passage, because one of the underlying factors in all of this is man's quest for comfort. It comes at a cost, and that's what we've done. And so it's this undoing of the comforts. And there's one of my favorite books, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and it's a short book, but it's a really good one. And basically he's a prophet about to leave a city that love him, And all these different people come forth and ask him, what about this and what about that? And to give his philosophy on different subjects. And then a mason came and asked him he said, speak to us of houses. So I'm just going to read this to you. What that I could gather your houses into my hand, and like a sower scatter them in forest and meadow. Would the valleys were your streets, and the green paths your alleys, that you might seek one another through vineyards, and come with the fragrance of the earth in your garments. But these things are not yet to be. In their fear your forefathers gathered you too near together, and that fear shall endure a little longer. A little longer shall your city walls separate your hearths from your fields. And tell me, people of Orphalese, that's where they were, what have you in these houses? And what is it that you guard with your fastened doors? Have you peace, the quiet urge that reveals your power? Have you remembrances, the glimmering arches that span the summits of the mind? Have you beauty that leads the heart from things fashioned of wood and stone to the holy mountain? Tell me, have you these in your houses? Or have you only comfort and the lust for comfort, that stealthy thing that enters the house as a guest, and then becomes a host, and then a master? Aye, and it becomes a tamer, and with hook and scourge makes puppets of your larger desires. Though its hands are silken, its heart is of iron. It lulls you to sleep, only to stand by your bed and jeer at the dignity of the flesh. It makes mock of your sound senses, and lays them in thistledown like fragile vessels. Verily, the lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul, and then walks grinning in the funeral. But you, children of space, you restless in rest, you shall not be trapped nor tamed. Your house shall not be an anchor, but a mast. It shall not be a glistening film that covers a wound, but an eyelid that guards the eye. You shall not fold your wings, that you may pass through doors, nor bend your head, that they strike not against the ceiling, nor fear to breathe, lest walls should crack and fall. You shall not dwell in tombs made by the dead for the living. And though of magnificence and splendour, your house shall not hold your secret, nor shelter your longing. For that which is boundless in you abides in the mansion of the sky, whose door is the morning mist, and whose windows are the songs and the silences of night. And it goes on to talk about clothes. Actually, we could get into it. No, maybe I'll save that one. Yep. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the next podcast. Godspeed.